So this slide, we look at some definitions, and as you can see, it's the psychological ingredients for displaying virtues and human goodness. They are the capacities for thinking, feeling, and behaviour. Now, this definition might be a little different from what you were expecting, and one of the reasons is we sort of misinterpret character strengths and what they are, and we jump to the other versions and other definitions of strengths, which might be talents, interests, skills, and resources. So, for example, when I ask you what your strengths are, these are the common ones that we hear. The character strengths are very uncommon, and for someone to be able to talk about their character strengths is even more uncommon. Therefore, this is the reason why I wanted to talk about it today, to really start to build your awareness around what character strengths are and how you can use them and how you can learn to look for them and create like a spotlight for them. I want you to think about character strengths as your individual core. They allow you to develop these other definitions for strengths. They also allow you to be yourself and be very authentic and unique in different contexts. And ultimately, they allow you to function at your best. As mentioned in the previous slide, it is quite uncommon to talk about character strengths. Therefore, there is this term, strengths blindness, and there are a few different reasons for it. The first one is general unawareness of strengths, and the way I like to think about this is a deer in the headlight. I've had this sometimes when I've asked athletes to talk about their strengths. They're sort of frozen. They don't know what to say. It's almost like I've asked them a really, really difficult question. And this is, what we're finding more often is if I was to actually word it in a different way and say, can you talk to me about your areas for development and your weaknesses? It's much easier to talk about than to talk about your strengths. So the general unawareness of strengths is the first area towards this strengths blindness that we have sometimes. A disconnect with the meaning. Now this basically means we will highlight other strengths, not character strengths. So, the talents, the skills, the external resources, as opposed to talking about our character strengths. Now, the important thing to point out here is that your character strengths are the connection between the substance and the meaning. They allow your other strengths, your physical strengths, your external strengths to come out more in different contexts. So that's the substance there. That's the connection part here. By exploring character strengths, we're also promoting the other areas of strengths and giving them a space to thrive and to flourish, as we call it. One of the other areas as well is seeing these strengths as ordinary. Oh yeah, do you know what? I already knew that. And, I'm not going to celebrate that much. I'm not going to talk about it because it's expected. Whereas actually these are extraordinary. They are unique to you. They are the driving forces between who you are as a person and as an athlete and the behaviours that you display, and they shouldn't be taken for granted, so to speak. And then overuse as well. So actually we see the other side of the spectrum is where we use them so much that actually it can really hinder behaviours in different contexts, and there's a general unawareness of that effect or that impact. Here is a list of the 6 virtues and the 24 character strengths that you can display. And the key part there is you can display. Now, you will be using and displaying all of these 24 character strengths in different contexts. It's not a case of some we use and some we don't use. We actually use all of them, but there are times and places where they become higher and lower order. For example, curiosity might be a higher order character strength in training as opposed to in a match. But the idea here is we can start to become more aware of those higher order themes or higher order character strengths and how they relate to your performances and your behaviours in the different contexts. So I'm not going to talk too much in detail here, but as I'm talking, I want you to be looking through these, and I want you to be starting to think, right, how can I be using these? Is this, let's say, for example, in a athletic environment or in my sport, which are the higher order character strengths that I feel are really important to my performance? We can see here the pieces of research that have been delivered around character strengths, and we can see that actually by exploring these, we have increased levels of happiness, work satisfaction, and well-being and goal achievement as well. Also as well, by exploring signature strengths, this can help you make progress by allowing you to meet your basic psychological needs as well. So we're really starting to see that character strengths can have a huge impact on our development, not just our overall well-being, but also within a performance context as well. So have a look at these 24 character strengths. The key thing here is that you will be displaying all 24, but at certain times in your sport, there are higher order and lower order character strengths. This is a link to a values in action survey, which is a really nice tool to have here, because what it can do is give you the opportunity to explore your character strengths in more detail. It's quite a long and lengthy survey. I think it's about 120 questions, so I'm not going to ask you to do it sort of today, but it's something that you can explore, because what it will do is ask you set questions and then give you results of your higher order themes. So just like we spoke in the previous slide around the 24 character strengths, it will give you your top 10, but it will also highlight where they rank in terms of 1 to 24. The key part there is it's not a case of 24th is one that you don't use. It's more just actually in the context of the questions, it was a lower order character strength, maybe not seen as important, but it definitely means you don't use them. So yeah, it'll give you a brief report on your character strengths, some of your top order ones and your signature strengths as we call them. And that's a really nice starting point here. So feel free to click the link, sign up and utilize and take the survey. And that will give us a really nice baseline if you're really interested in exploring what your character strengths are. So the framework that we use is aware, explore and apply. This can be really simple and is a really nice way of talking more about character strengths and getting this into the conversation, but also getting this into practice and the performance context. Aware means simply being aware of your character strengths, so taking the survey, getting your results, or maybe even just asking yourself, look at those 24 and say which ones are applicable to me, which ones are the ones that I really find useful in a performance context for my sport. Being aware of your best qualities, and let's say for example signature strengths, which is what we call them, which are your top 10 character strengths, and considering how these are and how these relate to who you are as a person, and almost kind of asking yourself this question here: does it feel like you when you're expressing these strengths? The second part is exploration. This is the how and the when. This is starting to go, right, I've identified, let's say, curiosity or creativity, but how have I used that when I was at my best? Or how have I used that in a performance context? How have I used that within my sport? When did I use it and how was it helpful? When did I use this in other contexts? So the idea between character strengths is we can start in a sporting context, which is maybe where you feel a little bit more familiar. But I would encourage you to start exploring how you use this outside of sport as well, in education, but also in social life, family life, because I can guarantee that these character strengths are here. And when we can start to, when we're more aware of them, then we can explore how we use them. And then the second one is apply and start setting goals based on character strengths, specifically on them. So for example, we could do, a strengths diary, which is where every single day you have to highlight a different strength that you've used or a character strength, and then reflect upon the how and the when. So we start to actually move this conversation into more everyday, discussions, as opposed to, at the moment, it might be, I don't talk about character strengths very often. The roadmap analogy is also another interesting way of remembering and even starting to explore how we can increase talking about character strengths. The first one is reflect, and being able to reflect upon when you're at your best, what strengths did you use? Observation, rather than trying to spot these strengths, simply observe your environment with curiosity. Simply just be there and be able to observe yourself in these different contexts. The appreciate is the A part, and this is where we start to go, okay, can we tell others what their strengths are? This links into a strength of ours, that we tend to be able to highlight strengths in other people better than we highlight strengths in ourselves. But the more we start to explore this conversation, the better we become. Discuss. Communicate with others about your strengths of character. And this one is an interesting one because sometimes we hesitate around this, around not wanting to come across as cocky or as arrogant, but ultimately create a space within your social groups within the sport where you invite people to talk more about their character strengths. So there's that invitation to talk about it from an individual perspective. That increases the likelihood of these types of conversations happening. It's the invitation, because when there's the invitation, the words cocky and arrogant, they fall by the wayside ultimately. Monitor, again, this would be keep a sort of strengths log and be able to monitor that and see, okay, on certain days I tend to use more of these character strengths as opposed to this one. In a training environment, I use these strengths, and in a match day environment, I tend to use these character strengths. Second one, the final one here is, the penultimate one is ask. Get feedback from your friends, from your family, people that you trust within your support group around your character strengths and what they would say your character strengths are. Again, increasing the dialogue here. Just having these conversations means we're more likely to talk about character strengths. And the final one is P. Set some targets, plan, and set some targets around your strengths here, and specifically your character strengths. And this is a strengths log, and this is something I would encourage every person to at least attempt. I'm not saying you have to use it and use it religiously, but actually just be willing to attempt this, because it can be really valuable to help you highlight, okay, on certain days or in certain context, these are the character strengths that I find myself using, and this is how it contributes to the behaviours that I'm able to display, but also me when I'm at my best and the performances that I can put in. Really nice and simple, doesn't need to be complicated, but can be really, really beneficial for helping you become more aware, but also talking about this and highlighting the different types of strengths that you use when it comes down to character strengths. Just as a final note here, these are some references that you can check out around some of the studies. And if you want, to explore character strengths in a little bit more detail, these will be sort of nice sort of areas to check out.